Hi everyone! In this video, I'll be showing you how to make a case-bound hardcover book. Let's start by going over what you're going to need. First, you're going to need some paper to bind into your book. When picking the size of your paper, it should be double the width of what you want your final text block size to be. For example, I used 9 by 12 paper and my final text block size was 9 by 6. The next thing you should think about is the thickness of your paper. You should be really careful not to use really thin or really thick paper. Really thin paper is prone to tearing when sewing, and thick paper is hard to get a good crease in. I ended up using 50-pound drawing paper, and that seemed to be the perfect medium. You'll also need paper for the end pages and for the spine reinforcement. The paper for the end pages should be the same size as the paper that you're binding into your book. However, you can use paper that's a fun accent color, texture, or pattern for these. For the spine reinforcement, you can just use regular printer paper, since it really won't matter in the end. It's just there to help hold things together. You'll also need some thread to sew together your book. For the type of text block we're making, regular sewing thread is perfect. I would recommend using a medium or dark colored thread so that the visibility is better against white paper. You should also make sure that your thread is strong so that it won't rip in the middle of sewing. You will also need some glue to put together a few components. For bookbinding, pH-neutral PVA glue is the best option. It's a really strong glue and it won't degrade your paper over time. You'll need some cardboard to make the covers and spine of your book. The type of cardboard you need is closer to chipboard. Cardboard from the back of a drawing tablet works really well, and that's what I'll be using. To wrap your covers, you will need something called book cloth. It's a material used in bookbinding for this exact purpose. Its texture is pretty unique. It's somewhere between fabric and paper. However, if you don't have access to it, it can be substituted with cardstock paper. Aside from the materials needed to actually create your book, you'll probably want a few supplies to decorate it. Paints, inks, glitters, foils, and many other materials can be used to ornament your finished book. To sew together your book, you're going to need a needle. A regular sewing needle is perfect for this. Just make sure you're not using something too thick. Now, let's talk about one of the most important tools that you're going to need, the bone folder. It's a bookbinding specific tool that's often used to crease folds or evenly adhere surfaces, and throughout this process, it's going to become your best friend. However, if you don't have access to one, a metal or plastic ruler can be substituted. Another important tool you'll need is the awl. It's used to pierce holes in bookbinding and leatherworking. However, if you don't have access to one, a thumbtack or a sharp needle can be substituted for it. To protect your surface from all the cutting, piercing, and gluing you'll be doing, you probably want a work mat. Last, but certainly not least, you'll need a few other basic crafting tools. You'll need a sturdy knife, a pencil, a ruler, a few binder clips, and some washi tape or another similar paper tape. Now that you've assembled all of the different materials and tools you'll need, let's get started. The first step is going to be prepping your paper and making your signatures. In order to prep your paper, first you need to remove it from the drawing tablet. Get rid of any perforation and then fold it in half. After you've folded it, crease the fold with the bone folder. Repeat this process 3 more times so that you have a total of 4 leaves. Stack them inside of each other, aligning the spines. These 4 leaves make one signature. Repeat this process 9 more times to create the 10 signatures that you need. Next, we're going to prepare these signatures for binding. Using a few pieces of washi tape, I'm going to tightly bundle together all of my signatures, making sure that the spines are all aligned. Then, using a ruler, I'm going to make a vertical mark on the spine every 1 inch. Next, unbundle the signatures and use the awl and the work mat to pierce through them signature by signature at the markings. Now you're ready to sew. Take the first signature and do a simple straight stitch across the bottom. When you get to the other side of the signature, return the same way, so that way you have one continuous row of stitching. When you get back to the first hole, tie off your thread and go back out through that same hole. Grab your next signature and return the needle back to the first hole of the second signature. Now for the kettle stitch. You're going to take the needle out the second hole of the signature and take it down underneath of the first layer of stitching that you did on the first signature. Then you're going to come back up on the other side and return it back into the same hole. You're essentially creating a loop that goes from the hole below the stitching on both sides and goes back into that hole. And then you're going to repeat this for every single hole except for the last one of the signature, where you'll repeat what you did to add the second signature. For sake of time and interest, I've fast forwarded through adding the other signatures to the last one. So this is essentially going to be the same as what we did for all of the others. However, when you get all the way to the last hole on the last signature, you're not going to do the stitch to add a new signature. Instead, you're just going to return back into that hole and knot off your thread really, really tightly. Now that all of the signatures have been sewn together, it's time to turn them into a text block. First, apply a thin layer of PVA glue to the spine of the book. While this dries, you can make the end pages. To make these, you're essentially creating two leaves but out of the end page paper instead of the paper that you're binding into your book. Next, you're going to measure over 1/4 inch from the spine of your book and create a line very lightly in pencil. Then apply a thin layer of PVA glue to this area. You can now add your end pages. Be sure to smooth over the adhered area with a bone folder. At the end here, you can see how the text block looks with these end pages added. Now that the text block is almost done, you can add a few decorative details. First, I'm going to add a bookmark ribbon. This can be really easily done by taking a length of ribbon that's a little bit longer than your book and applying some PVA glue to the tail. You can then adhere this to the spine. Then I'm going to make and add some headbands. These can be created by cutting out 2 rectangles of material the same width of the spine of your text block. Next, I'll apply a thin layer of adhesive to them and begin to roll them, leaving a small margin at the bottom so they can be adhered to the spine of the book. While you're making these, be sure to compare them to each other so they turn out to be the same size. After you've made them, you can apply a little bit more adhesive to the margins so you can attach them to each end of the spine of your text block. Now it's time to add the last piece of the text block, the spine reinforcement. To do this, take a small rectangle of printer paper and wrap it from the front cover to the spine to the back cover and adhere it. This is going to act as another point of contact between the end pages and the spine, since right now they're only attached by a 1/4 inch strip of glue. After they're on there, I'm going to go over with a bone folder just to make sure they're evenly adhered. Now that you have a completed and dry text block, it's time to make the cover. To make the cover, I need 3 cardboard cover boards, one for the front cover, one for the back cover, and one for the spine. I added the appropriate margins to the measurements of the text block, so that way I would have extra cover on each side. Now that I have all of my cover boards cut out, I'm going to start wrapping them. First, I'm going to take the front cover and apply a thin layer of PVA glue. Then I'm going to place it down on my book cloth. Then I'm going to measure over 1/4 inch plus the actual thickness of the board and adhere the spine. Then I'm going to measure over the same distance and apply the back cover. Around this whole shape, I'm going to add a 1-inch margin using my ruler and pencil. Then I'm going to cut along this line and clip the corners so that everything can be neatly folded in. Next, I'm going to apply a thin line of glue to each edge so that the tabs that we created by clipping the corners can be neatly folded in. Of course, I'm going to go over these with the bone folder to make sure that they're nice and flat. Now that we have both the completed cover and the completed text block, it's time to put it all together and decorate it. So the first thing that we're going to attach is the spine. So on the spine of the cover, you're going to apply a thin layer of PVA glue. Then you're going to take the text block and line up the spine of the text block with the spine of the cover. After this is adhered, you're going to add a thin layer of glue to the inside of the front and back covers, and then you're going to adhere the end pages to them. After everything is glued together, you should put a heavy textbook or other heavy weight on top of this to prevent warping while drying from the dampness of the glue. After your book is completely dry, feel free to remove the weight and decorate however you see fit. For mine, I decided to use some gold ink to create some botanical illustrations on my end pages. Here are a few images of how the final book turned out. Thanks for watching.